Ejapon and his wife, Aso, had just welcomed their first daughter, their first child after 10 years of marriage. At the Agri Memorial Hospital, the couple was overwhelmed with joy. Awoya, Ejapon's mother, entered the maternity ward where the couple sat with the baby in Ejapon's arms. She entered with excitement, but felt disappointed when she learned the child was a girl. Though she was reluctant to hold the child, she tried to console herself by acknowledging the baby's beauty. Awoya had her concerns. Ejapon, her only son among 3 children, managed her late husband's estate, including a large cocoa farm. Without a male grandchild to inherit it, there was a fear that the family would lose the farm to her late husband's relatives. She had vowed never to let that happen. Later that day, Aso was discharged from the hospital and took her baby home, never wanting to leave her daughter's side. Aso had lost both her parents at a young age and was raised by her grandmother, who also passed on years back. Her only family now was her husband and daughter. 8 days after the baby's birth, both families gathered for a traditional naming ceremony. She was named Nyameche, meaning a gift from God. As tradition dictated, Awoya moved in with the couple to care for the newborn. But the 3 months she spent with Aso were tense. Awoya constantly pressured Aso to have a male child, and nothing Aso did seemed to please her mother-in-law. Awoya had never approved of her son marrying Aso in the first place, so Aso wasn't bothered by her behavior. What mattered the most to Aso was having her daughter and a husband who adored her. The 3 months seemed like eternity, but finally it passed. Awoya didn't even stay a day longer, leaving with the excuse that her cassava farm had been unattended to for too long and thieves might steal from it. Aso, still in need of help with house chores, asked her husband to bring her childhood friend from her mother's village to assist her. Her husband agreed, and within a week, Eunice joined the household. Relieved of the house chores, Aso spent more time with her daughter, ensuring she was always content. Life seemed good for Aso and her family. A year after giving birth, Aso resumed work at her thriving provision shop in Kejitia, in the heart of Kumasi. Eunice, with no obligations back home, decided to assist her at the shop as well. Months passed, and Eunice found love with one of their shop's regular customers, Mr. Otiko. Preparation for their wedding began, and within 2 months, both the traditional and white weddings were held. They were splendid, yet simple, with close family and friends in attendance. Mr. Otiko, who lived in the United States, had already started Eunice's travel paperwork so they could move there together. Exactly 1 week after the wedding, Eunice, now Mrs. Otiko, relocated to the United States with her husband, and Aso missed her dearly. In her 8 months of pregnancy, Aso began experiencing complications. This prompted her mother-in-law to bring a young woman from the village to assist with the shop and household chores. Aso's condition worsened as the weeks went by. Despite reaching her due date, there was no sign of labor, and she carried a pregnancy for an additional 3 months in constant pain. Ejapon, her husband, was devastated, wishing she had never become pregnant in the first place. He loved her dearly and couldn't bear to see her suffer. He finally requested the doctors to perform a cesarean section, even if it meant losing the child. On the day of the surgery, Nyameche, who had been staying with her grandmother, suddenly fell ill and cried non-stop. Tragically, Aso passed away during the surgery, along with their unborn son. Ejapon mourned his wife for months, vowing never to marry again. But his mother's influence made that promise seem futile. None of her children had given her a grandson, and she was determined to see one before she died. 7 months after Asor's death, Awoya suggested that Ejapon married a house help she had brought from the village to take care of Nyameche. Ejapon ignored her advice, but after the final rites were performed to lift the period of mourning, Awoya returned with a plan. She brought a small container of shea butter to the house help, Echa, and instructed her to apply it after bathing. Then, wrapped in a cloth, Echa was to visit Ejapon at night under the pretext of discussing something important. Echa followed her instructions, and before long, Ejapon fell for her and soon married her. Within no time, Echa became pregnant with twins. When Echa gave birth to her bouncy twins, Awoya moved in again to care for her and the babies. She adored the twins, a boy and a girl, because they represented the long-awaited heirs to the family's estate. Nyameche, now 6 years old, was increasingly sidelined by everyone in the family except for her father, who loved her dearly. Her stepmother, whom she had believed to be her real mother, made her do all the house chores. Nyameche fetched water, washed everyone's clothes, and cleaned the house. Her father remained unaware of her hardships, as her stepmother threatened severe punishment if she ever spoke a word of it to him. Despite everything, Nyameche's academic performance never faltered, and she remained committed to her Christian faith. Meanwhile, Ejapoma and Ejapon Jr., the twins, were doing poorly in school. Echa overindulged them, allowing them to shirk their responsibilities and behave badly. Ejapon Jr. developed a habit of stealing, while Ejapoma was disrespectful to everyone. This behavior reached the attention of their grandmother, who was very displeased. She called Echa for a serious conversation about the children's behavior. Though offended, Echa said nothing in response and only promised to do better in raising them. However, upon returning home, she reflected deeply on the conversation with her mother-in-law and realized she had been overstepping boundaries. She knew she had to take action. She then visited Babalao, a well-known fetish priest renowned for his spiritual powers. He gave her a brownish liquid in a bottle and instructed her to add a small amount to her mother-in-law's food. According to Babalao, after consuming the food with the substance, her mother-in-law would develop a slight mental illness. Grateful, Echa thanked Babalao, paid him with a white fowl and some cash, and headed straight home. Awoya fell seriously ill and was admitted to the hospital shortly after. When Ejapon heard about his mother's illness, he decided to visit her the next day. Echa took the opportunity to prepare live soup, into which she added the substance given by Babalao. However, she increased the dosage, aiming to drive her mother-in-law completely mad. The following day, Ejapon and Echa drove to Ejeso to visit Awoya, bringing fruit, provisions, and the soup. After spending some time with her, they prepared to leave, as there was already someone at the hospital to care for her. Insistent that Awoya should drink the soup so she could take her flask back home, Echa urged her to eat. Awoya opened the flask, and to their surprise, she drank all the soup. The couple then gathered their belongings and said their goodbyes. 4 days later, Ejapon received shocking news. His mother had gone mad. Alarmed, he rushed to her house in his old Toyota car, where neighbors had restrained her by tying her hands and legs to prevent her from running off. Ejapon was advised to take her to the psychiatric hospital for treatment, and he promptly did so. Upon hearing this news, Echa was overjoyed, believing her obstacle had finally been removed. Meanwhile, Nyameche was in her final year and needed to register for her WAEC exam, which required a small fee. To her surprise, her father refused to give her the money. This was highly unusual, as Ejapon had always supported her, especially in matters relating to her education. Nyameche tried everything to convince her father, but he turned a deaf ear to her pleas. Unbeknownst to Nyameche, Echan had visited Babalawo again, this time to make Ejapon indifferent towards Nyameche and any other relative. Now, Ejapon only listened to his wife and acted solely based on her instructions, ignoring everyone else's request or advice. Though the situation seemed strange, no one could do anything to change it. Ejapon Jr. got involved with a gang and was arrested. Although only 15 years old, both he and his sister Ejapoma appeared much older due to their well-fed and pampered lifestyle. They didn't have to work or worry about anything, and their mother, Echa, spoiled them constantly, which made them look robust and healthy. In contrast, Nyameche, though slim and delicate, had a striking beauty of her own. Among the gang members was Agokoli, Ejapon Jr.'s best friend, who was just as troublesome as he was. Agokoli's mother, Sichope, was a well-known and intimidating baker in the neighboring community. She was tall and extremely large in size, and rumors circulated that she used juju to boost her bread sales. It was also said that she had cast a spell on her husband, who worked like a servant in her home. When Ejapon Jr. and Agokoli were arrested, their mothers met at the police station, where the boys were required to sign a bond of good behavior. This encounter marked the beginning of the friendship between Echa and Sichupe. Meanwhile, back at home, Nyameche was juggling her responsibilities at the shop with all the house chores. She would often cry herself to sleep, praying for miracle. Despite her struggles, she remained devoted to her faith, actively participating as a prayer warrior and a singer at the Sinai Prayer Ministry. She never missed a rehearsal or prayer meeting. One day, Ejapon received exciting news from a childhood friend in Ejoso, who had just returned from the United States. Eunice, Asa's childhood friend, wanted Nyameche to come live with her in the United States and continue her education there. Overjoyed, Ejapon shared the good news with Echa as soon as he got home. However, Echa was far from pleased. A scheme quickly formed in her mind. She planned to switch Nyameche with Ejapoma so that her daughter would be the one to go to the United States. Since she had already bewitched her husband, she informed him that Ejapoma would replace Nyameche for the trip. After all, Eunice hadn't seen Nyameche in years and wouldn't recognize her now. Ejapon, under the influence of the spell, had no say in the matter. However, there was a complication. Eunice was planning to visit Ghana the following year to personally take Nyameche with her. She had already made direct contact with Ejapon and even sent money to begin the necessary paperwork. All the money intended for Nyameche's travel documents was instead used to process Ejapoma's papers to go abroad. Echa viewed Nyameche as a threat and decided to eliminate her completely. She visited Babalawo and asked him to get rid of Nyameche. Babalawo provided her with a concoction and instructed her to mix it into Nyameche's food. When Echa got home that day, Nyameche had just finished cooking and was about to serve the meal. Echa sent Nyameche to place her bag in the bedroom. She had already removed the concoction and was holding it in her hand. As soon as Nyameche left the kitchen, Echa quickly dished out everyone's food and sprinkled the concoction on Nyameche's portion. Nyameche returned, prayed over her food, and ate it. The next day, she fell seriously ill and was taken to the hospital. The doctors diagnosed her with malaria, which was easily treatable. After a few days, Nyameche was discharged and made a full recovery. Echa was baffled. She thought perhaps she didn't use enough of the concoction, So she decided to try again, this time using the entire portion. Once more, nothing happened to Nyameche. She remained perfectly healthy. Frustrated, Echa turned to her friend Sichope for help. Sichope then devised a new plan and gave Echa precise instruction on when and how to carry it. The plan was to lure Nyameche to Sichope's bakery, which was far from the main town, and throw her into Sichope's large clay oven. Sichope often used the oven to smoke fish, so the smell wouldn't attract suspicion. After the deed was done, Ejapoma would go to confirm that the task had been completed. On the chosen day, Echa sent Nyameche on an errand to Sichope, asking her to check if the bread she ordered was ready for the next day. The journey to Sichope's bakery would take about 45 minutes. However, as Nyameche was on her way, she heard the church bells ringing for the midweek service. Being deeply committed to her faith, she couldn't miss church, so she decided to attend the service before heading to Sichope's bakery. The service ran longer than usual, but as a choir member, she couldn't leave before it ended. Meanwhile, anxious to know if the plan had been executed, Echa sent Ejapoma to Sichope's bakery to confirm. Ejapoma hurriedly made her way there. Sichope had never seen either of Echa's daughter before and didn't know which one was Nyameche. When Sichope saw Ejapoma approaching, she assumed she was the target. She placed a soft drink beside her and invited Ejapoma to sit on a small stool. After offering her the drink, Ejapoma began feeling dizzy and soon collapsed. Sichope, being a large and strong woman, easily carried Ejapoma and threw her into the clay oven. The smell of burning will go unnoticed since Sichope often used the oven to smoke fish. Minutes later, Nyameche finally arrived at the bakery to deliver a chance message. Sichope, believing her task was completed, told Nyameche that everything was taken care of. Nyameche then left and headed home. As Nyameche approached the house, Echa eagerly waited by the entrance, expecting to hear that Nyameche had been eliminated. To her shock, it was Nyameche who returned. She clenched her chest, bombarding Nyameche with questions she couldn't answer. Her loud outburst attracted attention, and in the midst of it, Echa suddenly began confessing everything she had done. At that moment, the spell over Ejapon was broken. Hurried by what he heard, Ejapon immediately called the police, and both Echa and Sichope were arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Ejapoma was given a proper burial, while Nyameche eventually traveled to the United States to continue her education. Aloy recovered from her madness and was discharged from the hospital. Ejapon, deeply affected by everything, never remarried. He dedicated the rest of his life to raise Ejapon Jr. to the best of his ability. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and like for more.